see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Hi, it's Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogues on How to Build a Culture of Empathy. And today I'm here with Stephanie Bachmann-Mattei. Thank you, Stephanie, for joining me for this dialogue.
Thank you, Edwin. Thank you.
Yeah, so pleased you're here. And see, to give a little bit of background about you, it says, I checked your website, and it says parenting is your niche. You're an NVC trainer, and you're kind of focused on the area of NVC, and NVC is how it's applied to parenting. And I thought maybe we could start off by showing a few of your websites, and you can just kind of maybe give a bit more background about yourself.
Okay.
So
all right. Yeah.
I can show the websites here as you talk too. So
all right. So yes, I became a mother in 1997, and so even the last few months when I was pregnant, I focused a lot on what it would mean for me to become a mother and what kind of a responsibility it would be to raise a child. And so this has been a focus from that very time. And I consider myself, very fortunate, very blessed. I was still actually pregnant with my first son when I encountered La Leche League International. And so I learned about, breastfeeding and gentle parenting approaches, attachment parenting. So that all gave me an incredible support in, all of a sudden being a mother, having a baby, and as you might have heard the saying, babies don't come with the booklet of instructions.
Manual.
Exactly, the manual. Thank you. So so it has been a passion of mine from, as I said, from the time I became a mother myself. I have plunged myself into studying and reading, about parenting, different parenting approaches. And in that way, then I wanted to support other parents about what I had learned and what I had found useful to me in my own journey. And so that is how I started. I became a certified parent educator, and then I encountered NVC. And that is then, my other step in my parenting, which for me has been like, a continuation of attachment parenting. There is a lot about attachment parenting in terms of relationship with babies and young children. But then it came a point where, okay, how do I bridge that with an older child? And when I say older is, even just 4, 5, 6. And so NVC has helped me tremendously. In that. So in terms of, I don't know exactly now which website you are thinking
well, let me start with, you're talking about NVC, so you're doing workshops on NVC Academy, which I'll show here.
Right.
So you have your bio page,
right.
And NVC Academy's online training website for NVC related training.
Exactly.
I also see here you have the Parent Peer Leadership Program.
Yes.
That's one of your websites, and maybe you could just say what that is about.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Yes, I have been working for the NVC Academy as a team member for the last 3, almost 4 years now. And I also have offered some trainings myself in parenting and mediation, or parenting and anger, parenting and brain science. Sometimes on my own, and sometimes with a very good friend of mine, a certified trainer, John Kenyon. And I believe you have an interview with him as well on your website. So his niche is mediation. And so we put ourselves together, and we had a course, and we still offer a course on, mediating conflicts with children. In terms of the Parent Peer Leadership Program, this is a program that was started in 2006 by certified trainer in Balkashtan from Bay NVC, so in California, in the Bay Area. And I have been part of this program from the beginning. So I was a participant under Inbal, and then I was an assistant for a few years, and then have started co-leading it with certified trainer Ingrid Bauer. So this is, for me, this is an incredible program. And for me, this relates very much, to what I understand is your project about how to raise empathy, how to raise a culture of empathy and raise empathy in the world. And the way this program is structured is that it's a 9 months program. And right now we are offering it completely online. So it's through webinars. Actually, it's telecourses and online components, email group, a wiki site. And so we basically focus for half of the time, so it's 4.5 months, on parenting. So how do we apply the NVC, the so-called NVC consciousness, which for me means really, really being open-hearted and in this state of receptivity towards ourselves and other people. And so in this case, our children or children in general. And I see it's clicking again. So we spend about 4.5 months really focusing on our own parenting journey and how to learn new skills and integrate them in our own families. And then the second part of the program is actually a leadership program. So at that point, we look at, empowering ourselves with leadership skills, and participants are requested, and they know that obviously from, the beginning of the program, to actually then start practice groups for parents. And so this is, for me, the visionary approach that Inbal had in creating this program, so that we create this ripple effect, and more people are, I'm getting distracted by the clicking that I see with the light, so that more and more people are really exposed to, one, the education, if they are seeking it, parenting education, and also the modeling. So really how we can, learn and embody an empathic parenting approach.
Well, before we kind of really delved into that, I just want to be sure
Yes.
that I covered all your websites so people can find you.
Yeah.
And there's another site here, consciouslyparenting.com, and you have, is that kind of your interface for the training, or?
That is another parenting project that I joined several years ago. It's a very good friend of mine, Rebecca, that has founded this parenting project, and I have been offering some telecourses and one-on-one coaching and counseling for families. And that part in particular, there I have been working with adoptive families, and I have 2 biological children and 1 adopted child. So there is a specific and special place in my heart for adoptive parents and all that entails in terms of specific challenges that adoptive parents.
So are there other websites? Is this the kind of the gateway to kind of find you? Because you have a lot of different places. I was kind of doing a search on you and saying, well, I didn't see one central location to find.
Absolutely, yes. I'm working on my own website, and it's a work in process. And so yeah.
Okay, well, this is the gateway.
That are the places.
Yeah, this is how people can find you then. So kind of. One thing I've been asking people kind of to begin with is about their values. We want to talk about how do we build a culture of empathy, but I find it helpful to start with finding out what people's most important value is personally. And I was wondering, for you, what's your most important value?
Yeah, I guess I would say, it's 2 values, which for me are like, the 2 faces of a coin, of the same coin. One is integrity. So really having clarity of what I value in my own life, which are the values that I want to bring forth in my life. So for instance, in relation to my children, how I want to be with them and what is important in my relationship with them, and try to live from that place. So it's really about being as clear as possible about, a moment by moment. It's kind of a mindfulness process.
Hmm.
Really, what are the values that I'm trying to bring forth with each interaction, with each choice, and
So
in my daily
it's
life.
integrity, being kind of aware of where you are with yourself and kind of being honest about that. And
Exactly.
uh,
It's yes,
and then what
yes,
I've been trying to
yes.
look at is find how people's most important value relates to empathy. What's
Yeah,
the connection? How do you
yeah.
see integrity relating to empathy?
And that is perhaps the other side of the coin. For me, the other side of the coin is self-compassion, because obviously there are times when I do not live in integrity with my own values. Maybe I'm not even aware of my values in that very moment, or even if I am aware, I'm not able to manifest them the way I would like. So then the self-compassion piece plays a huge role for me. And so that is for me, where empathy really starts. It
Uh-huh.
starts with
Oh,
myself,
okay.
because I cannot offer to others, and especially to my children, what I don't have for
Hmm.
myself.
So you're
This is
wanting to have integrity and live from kind of your honest self, and sometimes it's hard to do that. Maybe fear, anxieties come up,
absolutely,
and
absolutely,
then but to not judge yourself and say no, you must be this, but rather have compassion
exactly.
and a sense
Yes.
of I guess self empathy
So,
then
yes,
too. Uh huh.
self-acceptance, and that just being able to hold myself tenderly when I do not live in integrity.
Hmm.
And I have noticed that the more I'm able to do that with myself, the more I'm able to extend that compassion, that empathic presence to my children.
Mm.
Because
Well,
when I am in self-judgment, then it's quite easy also to judge others.
yeah. Right. So if you're judging yourself, you'll be judging others. If you're not judging yourself, you probably are not going to be judging others. So it kind of starts with that self
Exactly. Yes.
compassion, self empathy. Then, so well, since we're talking about how to build a culture of empathy, there's so many definitions of empathy, and one way I find kind of to get into it is to hear what people's metaphors of empathy are, because
Yeah.
often empathy is even defined as the metaphor of standing in someone else's shoes, looking through
Mhm.
someone else's eyes. And for me, empathy is like a cornucopia. It's like this,
Yes.
it's richness of this door of experience that kind of opens. So I'm wondering if you have like a metaphor of what empathy is like for you.
Hmm. Yes, yes. My metaphor is really this image of, a new parent with his or her baby. So just the other day, I was, at the beach, and there was this young couple with their baby, and I was looking at them, and how they were interacting, and all the cuckooing, and just the smiling, and so I was thinking, what that for me is empathy.
Hmm.
That for me is empathy. So it's this attunement. So if I were to use just one word, it would be attunement. So I'm fully present with this one person, and I am totally engaged. So my whole focus is on that person. And when I'm totally engaged with this person, so with my child, for instance, then also I may obviously have inner reactions. My inner life keeps happening. So I can be mindfully present for it as well, but not get pulled out of my relationship with my child due to what is happening in my own life.
Hmm. So
So
that's kind of a metaphor that empathy is like parents cooing with their child.
absolutely,
Then is that
absolutely,
it's that picture because the parents are just wanting to
totally there.
there, they're reflecting, they're making the whatever silly little
Yeah,
faces and all that kind of stuff that they
exactly.
would for their
Yes,
children.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah, that's a pretty metaphor. So if we build a culture of empathy, is we're all going to be cooing to
Cooing.
each to
Well,
each
it's
other.
really about mirroring,
Very, uh-huh.
and I mean, I don't want to go now into too many details, but there is a lot that happens, for instance, in both brains the parent's brain and the child's brain through this attunement. And so it's really about, in some parts of our brain, we experience somehow what the other person is experiencing. So it's outside, it's the cooing, but inside, there is a whole lot that is happening. And it's really about this fine-tuning of two human beings into one reality.
Well, you're kind of talking about that's another aspect I'm kind of looking at for empathy is what's the felt experience? Like we kind of have your metaphor of what empathy is like. But if you feel it as a felt experience, what does empathy feel like to you? Kind of, somatically or feeling wise or sensory wise?
Yeah, well, it certainly has something to do with a sense of calmness and relaxation in my body. So that is certainly, the first felt sense. There is also a balancing of what I would define my brain state. And so basically for me, it's really shifting from a reactive mode into a responsive mode. So it's a relaxing of my whole being, physiologically and, neurologically.
So you relax into your body. Your body feels more relaxed and
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
And I see that, and I see my mind also relaxes, and somehow I can tap back into my own creativity. And that is one of the powers for me of empathy. I'm not solving your problems or, giving you advice or anything. I'm there for you. And basically just by holding this container for you, you are able then to tap into areas of your own power and creativity, which when you are in a state of unbalance or fear, and dysregulation, you are not able to tap into.
Oh, yeah. So it's when we have that sense of kind of balance with the different forces within ourselves and we're calm with them, it kind of, I've noticed that too. It's almost like our brain automatically, creatively looks for problem solving or kind of what the next stage is. And that kind of creates the space then for that creativity to happen.
Yeah. And yes, from, a neurological standpoint, the way I'm understanding it is that, when we are able to name even just a feeling, whether for ourselves or for somebody else, the parts of the brain that are overstimulated, the so-called the limbic system, so the emotional part of the brain that gets into this fight or flight reactivity is able to come down. And that has been actually proven, scientifically through MRIs and all of that. And so when this part of the brain is able to relax, then other parts of the brain are able to come back online more fully. Mm-hmm. And so then I can tap again into my higher functions of the brains, of my brain, and therefore, reconnect with my creativity, my power.
And that's maybe that balancing, because you're kind of balancing the different parts of your body aren't kind of like out of, one isn't kind of dominant or something, perhaps.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, how did you first discover the power of empathy? Was there, some people have like an aha moment, like a transcendent, oh, this is so great, and then others, for like me, it was like a slow process of just kind of discovering it. Is there some time when you kind of said, hey, this is really important, and you learned some insight about empathy?
I guess, yes, a turning point for me has actually been when I met Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. That was back in New York 10 years ago, because, yes, my second son was 1 year old when we went there. So, so just witnessing, the level of presence that he was bringing in the interactions. And there is a specific incident that I recall very vividly. We were actually in, I believe it was a church that we had the first day, the training, and somebody just came in, and it happened to be a person who was, mentally not stable. So he could have been perceived as, a disturbance or, an intruder. And really, Marshall just made the space for this person to fully connect with him, to the point that, I myself didn't understand exactly what was going on. And I thought, okay, is that just, a role play? Are they trying to make a point here? Or is this real life happening, And I realized that it was real life happening. And so that for me was huge. So he was able to put aside, whatever maybe agenda he had in terms of, I want to cover those pieces in this time frame, or, I'm here with the group and I want to work with this group. He was really fully there for this one person who nobody expected, to show up. And so that was for me, an incredible modeling that I witnessed.
Yeah, so it's like he really embodied the empathy, and it sounds like he just reached out empathically to this person.
Yes.
And you could really feel that.
Yes. And again, was fully present and fully engaged with this specific person. So that is, my
That's that aha moment. Say, hey, this is really something. There's something really to this empathy.
Yeah.
So.
And as for, myself experiencing it, it has been more of a gradual thing. Just, seeing how people could receive me, especially when, there were times that I had a hard time receiving myself. So opening up to another person about something that, for instance, I was feeling, to say the very least, vulnerable, to say, on the other hand, total, of the scale would be shame, and being received with empathy and care and love. That has been, an incredible experience that has built over time and still keeps, joyfully surprising me.
So you're really, you've received it. You've been on the receiving end, and you kind of see how good it feels to have somebody listen and empathize with you. Well, that's what I'm trying to do in these dialogues, is really look at how do we build a culture of empathy, which is how do we raise the whole cultural level of empathy in society. And so your area has really been around parenting, and I think that's like a really great area, because it seems to me the importance of building a culture of empathy within the family is like, probably one of the most significant places we can do it. I just noticed that your video froze, and one way you can maybe unfreeze it is to stop and start it. And if you start it again, yeah, there's always these little bugs and glitches and stuff. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're moving again. Sometimes it freezes, or you have audio problems. You had a little bit of flicker there, and that's something with the camera too. So yeah, so what do you see as ways of building a culture of empathy, within parenting, within the family, and in society in general?
Yeah, there is, this one quote by Mahatma Gandhi, who said that if we want to reach real peace in the world, we have to start with the children. And so for me, paraphrasing that is, if you really want a culture of empathy, we shall start with the children. And I actually have two other quotes that I would like to share around this. And one is by Dr. Daniel Siegel. And he is writing, and these are his words, "It's not an exaggeration to say that the kind of relationships you provide to your children will affect generations to come." So obviously he's speaking from a brain scientist standpoint. And here we have it again. So when we interact with our children, we are not only affecting our children, our family, we are affecting the world right now and in the future generations. And the other quote that I have, which is one of my favorite ones, is by Dr. Bruce Perry. And I had the pleasure to study a little bit with him. And this is one of my favorite sentences of his. So he says, being born a human being does not ensure a child will become humane. Humans become humane. The capacity to care, to share, to listen, value, and be empathic, to be compassionate, develops from being cared for, shared with, listened to, valued, and nurtured. Human caregiving expresses our capacity to be humane. Inhumane caregiving can decrease or even destroy this capacity. So here again, we have, a brain scientist who is basically telling us that when we are raising our children, we have a tremendous power to influence how the brain develops. So it's not only how it functions, but actually the structure itself of the brain. And so depending on, how the brain wires, depending on the experiences that a child has, especially in the early years, can, affect the life of this person, and therefore, other lives, because of this ripple effect. We are all in relationship with other people. So how important a humane parenting is to create a society where empathy is a quality, where that can be experienced.
So it's kind of like if parents are modeling empathy, being empathic with the children, that the children kind of are building that empathic way of being, wiring their brains to themselves to act in an empathic way.
Yes.
And then that has a ripple effect as they go off to school, as they go off to work, if they go into society, that they'll bring that awareness, that empathy.
Yes.
And have that ripple effect, then, is kind of what I'm hearing here. Uh-huh.
Yes. Because, it's more than a skill. It's really, something very transformative that has a huge impact. I mean, every experience has a huge impact on our brain. So depending on the experiences that we have, our brain wires in a different way.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's that difference of in the schools. You might want to move the camera a little bit. It's flickering at that kind of period.
Okay.
So in the schools, sometimes it says, be nice, or do this. So it's like we don't need the signs. Yeah, we need the modeling of it, and
exactly.
So So how do you create that environment? How do you create that? Because the parents are all stressed too, right? They're frazzled. They're struggling at work. They're not, maybe the empathy is not there at work either. There's financial problems. There's relationship problems, and what do you do?
So you are raising a very important point for me. It brings me back to, you start with yourself. So the more stressed I am, the less empathic I am, because my brain is not really able to make space for somebody else when I'm in this kind of a survival state. So the more I can take care of myself, and we have heard that, tons of times about, the hostess telling you to put your own oxygen mask before you give it to your child, and so on and so forth. And yet I notice, for instance, in my own journey, this is something that I keep learning and I keep growing in it. So how do I take care of myself? Not only, in terms of going to the gym or taking a shower, but really to take care of myself at the emotional level so that I can empower myself to be as balanced as I can be. So that the more balanced my brain is, the more I go back to, I can live in integrity with my own values. I can actually remember what my values are. And so I can make choices around that.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering, what are you doing really to do that for yourself? I mean,
for myself, well, it's really, well, for me, this means, for instance, having a meditation practice, a daily meditation practice. First thing in the morning, sit, even 10 minutes, and many studies actually show that even less, even, a couple of minutes a day is better than nothing. But just have some way to ground yourself, to make space for yourself, to hold yourself, and to take care of your brain. I heard Dr. Daniel Siegel actually, say that he hopes that, we will reach a level in which actually taking care of ourselves in terms of, meditation and mindfulness will become as flossing our teeth. Now, everybody's flossing their teeth. 20 years ago, it was something strange to do. But so hopefully, by, educating more and more, and also from a scientific point, proving how much that can make a difference in our self-regulation, then parents can start making some space for themselves. And for me, a crucial piece was learning that when I make space for myself, it's not something selfish I'm doing. I'm actually doing it for my family as well. Because, the more regulated emotionally I am, the better we are all off. Because, again, brain states and, emotional states get transmitted. So if I am nervous, if I'm stressed out, I will snap at the kids and the kids will get stressed. And even if I don't snap, it's physiologically, it's transmitted. So the more I can, be aware about my level of stress and take care of myself when I see it's rising, in my experience, the better off I am. So that is a time that I enjoy putting aside for myself. And then during the day, just being mindful, of washing my hands or how my feet are on the floor. This kind of practices just to ground me back into the present moment and into my body rather than being in my head all the time. And with our children, there are so many fears that come up. If I don't take care of potty training my child, will he end up in college with diapers? I'm now, exaggerating it, but there is so much that is going on when we parent our children. So much fear can arise. So the more I can be aware of my thinking, of my fears, and bring myself back into my body, as I said, the more I can then be really present for my children. So that, I would say, is a first step. And then it's really how I want to be in relationship with my children. And a huge, again, learning curve for me has been, and I want to refer back to Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, he has these two questions. The first question is, what do I want my child to do differently than what he or she is doing right now? And if I stop there and I'm just aware of what I want him or her to change, I can actually think that, punishment or, behavior modification rewards or, shaming my child or guilting my child can actually, fulfill my goal because my child may change his or her behavior. But then Dr. Marshall Rosenberg says, if we add a second question, which is, what do I want the reasons for my child's behavior, for him or her to make the choice of changing his or her behavior? What do I want the reasons to be? And so if I look at that question, then my answer is that I want my child to behave differently because I want for him to be connected to his needs and also to make space for other people's needs, since we live, interacting with other people. So that is a huge piece for me in how I can parent my children in a way that is more humane, going back to Dr. Bruce Perry, and that, in my understanding, raises the level of empathy because, it's a dance. It's a dance. I'm aware of what I want and what I need, and I take into consideration what you need. And so there is nothing fixed. There is not, if this is the problem, this is a solution. It's something that emerges from time to time through relationship.
Yeah. Well, I look at that. It's like that part for the what's kind of like the motivation is what you're saying, right? And is
Exactly.
like, what is the motivation for what the action is going to be? And the motivation that I've been looking at is, I call it the culture of empathy, that the motivation is to create an empathic environment. So it's like, what can I do to foster empathy kind of on an ongoing basis? We're even starting an empathy movement now. And one of the questions just will be is like how, we call them empathy circles, is you can bring a problem, like how is your work towards building a culture of empathy been going? What celebrations do you have, and what struggles, mornings or struggles have you had?
Yeah.
And so it's really about creating that underlying drive of wanting to foster empathy. And you had talked, you'd give me some ideas before on a list about things that block empathy with child rearing, and you'd just had mentioned some of them. They were like, punishment, using guilt and shame, and carrots and sticks. So can you talk about that as a block? Like, how does that block empathy? You know what I mean? It's like somehow those approaches actually kind of inhibit empathy.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Well, for the carrots and sticks, I'm thinking, one resource that I have enjoyed tremendously is the book by Alfie Kohn, Punished by Rewards. And he has a whole section on, how this works in the family. One of the things just to consider is, if I make a threat to my child, a threat of punishment, or if I dangle a reward, as a motivation for him or her to change his behavior, then first of all, the motivation is extrinsic. So it's nothing inside my child that is actually steering in him the desire to contribute, basically, to my well-being. But it's rather, what do I get out of it if I comply? So it's actually fostering. I know that parents, when they use rewards, that's not their intention. But implicitly, it can actually reinforce more of a narcissistic worldview. I walk in the world thinking, what's in it for me?
Mm-hmm.
So if there isn't anything in it for me, then I don't do it. Like, for instance, for the two of us right now, I'm not paying you for interviewing me, and you are not paying me for being here. So it's because why do we do that? Because we want to contribute to other people. So there is not an external reward or a fear of punishment. It's just the joy of contributing that we tap into. So again, that's the same thing for children. I want for children to come from that place. So when we use punishment, that's the same thing. So the child starts thinking how to avoid the punishment. So I comply because I want to avoid the punishment, not because I want to contribute. Even more so, and that is even scarier for me, is the child may even look beyond, and not consciously, but, beyond the fear of, the punishment. Let's give an example. It could be no TV, or, you're grounded, or whatever. I take the keys off the car. But a deeper fear with the punishments could be the fear of losing the relationship. And that is the crucial piece for me. For me, parenting is a lot about really being aware that the most important piece is not behavior, is the relationship. And so when I use punishment and rewards, or also the guilt or the shame, something with the relationship shifts. And in my experience, it's not for the better. So it creates, distrust, it creates pain, especially if we go with for instance, the guilt and the shame, so much of my own healing I see is needed because of interactions that I had as a child, and all the, the shame that I carry within, the sense of guilt, the taking responsibility for other people's feelings. So the more I can be aware of that, the less, emotional baggage I put on my children.
Yeah, so it's really about kind of grounding kind of the actions out of a sense of wanting to maintain connection then.
Yes.
And for me, the empathy is what the connection is we're kind of in each other's shoes, looking through each other's eyes, we're resonating, we're attuned to each other.
Yes.
And if something happens, where the attunement and the empathy is broken, how do we reestablish that empathic connection, and what will foster it? And it's hard to do when you're stressed, right? I mean, it's like you're stressed and you just want to solve the problem because you got too many things going, and then it's easy to kind of revert back to the punishment because it works fast, right? So
the younger the child, the quicker it works. The older the child, I wouldn't say that it necessarily works. And again, it works if it works in the short term. But if I am able not only to hold the interaction and focus, as much of the mainstream parenting wants us to focus on the behavior, if I'm able to maintain an awareness of what is my most important value, which is the relationship, and keep building and nurturing the trust in the relationship, then again the punishment is something that that is not accomplishing that for me. And again, when I am stressed and I do say something that I later regret, then the self-compassion comes in. But again, the more I'm able to be connected to myself in the moment, to be connected to my values, to have a practice, whether it's just, taking 3 breaths before I answer my son, just noticing how my body is tensing up. Okay, so let's say, going with a specific example, let's say I'm asking my child to set the table and he says no. Mm-hmm. And so I am tired. I have been running around the whole day, taking him places and doing stuff for him. And I'm just so tired and I just would like some cooperation. And so with this no is actually, triggering a stress response in me because I'm already stressed and I'm already, going overboard almost. So if I'm able to catch myself, even just notice my bodily reactions, that is a huge step for a parent. Just notice that my body's tensing up. Maybe I'm making a fist with my hands, or my jaw is clenching. Okay, that is a sign that I'm really going beyond my ability to cope with stress. So, and then have a little practice, whether it's just breathing a few times, taking a few deep breaths, sipping a glass of water, or in NVC, we learn about the self-empathy. So looking what are the, the values that are at stake for us right now. And then from that place of groundedness, make the next move. And then again, as you said, the empathy. So if my son or my daughter say no, rather than just staying with what I would like, which is some cooperation and get, the specific goal would be to have the table set, but really the value underneath it is to have some help and some ease and some cooperation. But then even, have the ability not to just stay with my reality, but what may be going on for my son to say no to that, And so that opens up a complete new world for me to discover, which if I use a punishment or a reward, I close up for me. I don't need to know what's going on for my son to just tell him that I will not take him to see his friends,
Yeah. Well,
so I lose in the relationship.
Yeah, the punishment is kind of stopping the dialogue, stopping the interaction, stopping the growth, stopping the relationship and the connection and kind of the evolving of it. So one thing I'm kind of seeing in what you're talking about, it's making me more aware of something that I've been trying to look at is creating. I call it a culture of empathy. It's kind of like saying this is the premise. This is the beginning premise that I want my relationships and my world to be. So it's something to always tap back into, right? I mean, people can use different words around this, connection or relationship, but you need something that when you're all and stress, say, well, I'm really about empathy, and that I want to find my way back. Even if I get lost, get off course,
Exactly.
you need something to kind of go back to, some kind of a foundation, some kind of a foundational value.
Yes.
And then, then try to find the approaches, the strategies, the policies to keep building that.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And, in the case of my relationship with my children, there are other pieces that I want to keep in mind, and I have noticed in my own journey. And, my oldest son, I didn't mention that, is 15, and my youngest is 7. A lot has also to do in finding my way back, is also, having, some sense of, for instance, child development, brain development, ages and stages of children, so that I can put, again, a specific behavior. When I'm caught in, focusing on the behavior, I can also just there make some more spaciousness around it and understand that, a tired 4-year-old has a very hard time, being able to even hear a request that you may have, or that. So just having a sense of, what are the developmental stages of children, or for instance, the whole thing about self-soothing, and it starts from babies. I mean, we have books out there that say still not to pick up a baby because they need to learn how to self-soothe. Well, from a brain science standpoint, we know that the particular system that is the brain system that is able to soothe this other emotional system that gets all triggered when needs are not being met for a baby is not in place. So from a scientific standpoint, it makes no sense saying that a baby or a very young child should be able to self-soothe, or I don't respond so that he or she develops this ability. It's quite the contrary. The more I respond, so I become this part of the brain, the hippocampus, and like an external hippocampus for the child. So I am this soothing presence, empathic, soothing presence for my child, so that the brain can experience those states and wire in that way.
It really models it. You need to keep modeling that soothing so that the brain can kind of reflect on that and see how to wire itself, because it'll kind of...
But, until I had this information, how would I be able to actually make, informed choices about how I want to parent my child? So for me, parenting has a huge lot to do with education. So the more I can learn about, children, their development, their brain, their developmental ages, the more I empower myself to respond empathically, if that's how I want to go about in my relationship with my children.
Yeah, well, that's something I've been looking at too, and I'm putting together a list of how to build a culture of empathy, and kind of the different approaches and different things that we can do. And one of them is really to commit ourselves to learning everything we can about it, to make it a lifelong quest. And a large part of that is what you're talking about, is the scientific part. There's so much now about attachment theory and how the brain works, and mirror neurons. Oxytocin levels, cortisol.
Exactly.
It goes on and on. So really to make it a lifelong quest to just educate ourselves, to have the the cognitive map and understanding of how all this works.
Yes. It's a very exciting time, because there is so much new research out there, especially in brain science, which is such a new field. Sometimes I have conversations with my mom. I mean, there was almost nothing out there. Well, there was Dr. Spock, so that was about it. And so so going back to parenting, if we look at the history of child rearing, I mean, there has been a tremendous evolution in like 2,000 years. You know, if you look at evolution itself, we are speaking about a million and million of years. But if we look at the evolution, for instance, in child rearing in 2,000 years, if you think of the ancient Greek and ancient Romans, how they were raising their children and how we are raising our children nowadays, there is such an abyss, so different, And if you think of, the different documents that the UN have produced and nations that have committed in the last 50 years or so, on protecting children and nourishing them and cherishing them. So we are making huge steps into a more humane parenting. But the more we do that intentionally, the quicker it even can go.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you see as the relationship? What is humane education and parenting related to empathy? How are you kind of making that connection? Like, what is?
Well, for me, they are really one and the same.
Okay.
They are really one and the same. So humane for me is, really, remembering that I am interacting with a human being at all times. And especially with children, it's so easy to forget that, because they have so small bodies, because we have all those conditionings that, the needs of an adult are more important. I am the authority. I need to mold them. There is a whole complete, basically it's an anthropological view of, human beings as being bad. And so we need to curb children at an early age so that they, become socialized as if we are not a social species, And so the more I can remember that I am dealing with a human being at all times. And for me, a very powerful practice has been just, looking my children in the eyes, especially when, I see myself triggered, maybe I'm angry, they did something, I didn't enjoy that. If I remember to just, seek their eyes, I notice that completely shifts me because it reminds me, okay, I'm dealing with a human being. And that brings me back to being a human being myself. And so then I enter this empathic space, which for me is humane, child rearing.
Yeah, so you're doing workshops on this on a regular basis, is that? Or
yes, well, the peer parent leadership program, the parent peer leadership program, I'm always mix the first two. It's called the PPLP, so I usually use just the short version of this. Will be starting in October, so it's a program that we regularly offer October through June, and then I offer workshops in person and online. When it's online, it's basically through the NVC Academy. So, workshops on different topics.
So what is the basic outline? If you were giving just a broad outline of the kind of the curriculum that you do, is there a kind of some overview of what kind of topics you cover and how you approach it?
Well, yes, there are obviously, depending on the topic, specific pieces that I cover. Like, I mentioned the mediation course that I do with John Kenyon, or together we do an anger course. There are some pieces that I like to cover regardless of the specific topic. And we touched upon those during our conversation, Edwin. One is, trying to empower ourselves as much as possible about, the research that is out there in terms of child development, brain development, and all of that. Another piece that is crucial for me, regardless of the specific topic, is some kind of self-connection practice. So how do I find myself, when I'm triggered? Because one thing that I have noticed in my own journey is, I can learn all those nice and very useful skills, but when I'm really in a place of fear and my fight or flight response got activated, everything goes out the window. So before I can remember anything about my values or the skills, I need to find just, one quick practice that can bring me back to myself. So this is one piece that I like to cover. And so give parents different, practices that I have found it helpful, and they may share others. Another piece that I like to at least touch upon is the importance of our own healing journey as parents. Because again, when we get triggered, and especially when there are reoccurring triggers, that actually signals that there is some unfinished business of our own. And one book I specifically enjoy, and I see the computer is clicking again. One book that I particularly enjoy is Dr. Daniel Siegel's Parenting from the Inside Out, which really gives, a good outline of, a kind of work that we can do with ourselves in order to then be able to be more present for our children. Because if I don't have my own baggage that is, interfering with my ability to be present for my children, then I can really engage with them rather than with my own unhealed stuff.
Okay. So we're kind of coming towards the end of our hour. I feel like I could talk for hours with you on this, because you're so enthusiastic. You're in your exploration of this, and I quite enjoy that, actually.
Thank you. And I'm Italian, so.
Oh yeah, that. So, is there any kind of points that you feel that should cover that haven't been covered in our dialogue so far? We can always continue the dialogue at another point.
Thank you. Yeah, I would really enjoy that. Yes, Edwin. Of course, I want to thank you for your time and your willingness to be here together today. Yeah, I guess the one piece that I want to reiterate time and again, as you say in English, is the self-compassion piece, because parenting is such, an incredible journey, and at the same time, it's also very challenging, and a lot comes up for us parents when we parent our children. So much is at stake because these are our children. So we want the best for them. And at the same time, we are only human beings. So we do make mistakes. And so particularly with parenting, I seem to sense that, as human beings, we are particularly vulnerable. And so the self-compassion piece is so important. We do mess up. We all do as human beings. And yes, we do mess up with our children. Sometimes we do mess up big time. But really, when we beat ourselves up, it's not helpful to anyone. It's not helpful to us, and it's not helpful to our children. If I am able to hold myself with compassion when I messed up, one thing that I'm actually modeling for my children, which I value, is for them to learn how to hold themselves when they will or have messed up. So that is a tremendous gift that I can give even when I messed up. So just catch myself back when I'm able to do that and hold myself with compassion. And from that place, I can go to the repair work, but that is the big piece for me.
Okay.
That, yeah.
The self-compassion, not getting rid of that self-judgment, and really realizing we all mess up. So we all lose connection at some point or other. Yeah. And,
exactly. Yeah, and it can be extremely painful with our kids, for us, even just for us, to realize that we have somehow, contributed to a disconnect. So.
Well, great. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion. I enjoyed it so much, and enjoyed meeting you and kind of experiencing your enthusiasm, and I hope we can keep the dialogue going, and perhaps do a panel discussion or something like that around this fantastic topic of really empathy in the house, and how to create a culture of empathy and compassion within the family. So
Yes. I thank you so much for your time and for your creativity in creating this whole project.
Okay, well, great, Stephanie. Then until we meet again, which I hope we do
Yes.
soon.
Right. Okay. We'll keep
Goodbye.
in touch.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.